Carly. Thank you so much for posting this question about trauma therapy. Today, we will have a class to go into the details of what trauma therapy is really about, what psychological trauma is and what it's not, and how we can include the best practices into our sessions with horses and horse-guided empowerment, or also other methods. My name is Christina Mars, and I will be leading you through this class. You already know me. You're a certified facilitator, so I'm really happy to have you here and to help you deal better with clients who have experienced a psychological trauma. Just quickly tell me a little bit about why this is so interesting to you, what you already know about it, what your background is, and then we can dive right into it.
Great. Thank you so much. And yes, I'm really interested in this because after watching the week-long intensive by Dr. Gabor Mate of The Wisdom of Trauma, I have been wanting to get deeper into the study of how we can integrate trauma, which all of us have lived in some level in our lives, and how something that is so common can be worked in a session with horse-guided empowerment. I think for me, it's something that there's a big need here in this area as well, of people who are looking for new ways to work with their trauma or face it in more alternative ways. And so I think especially the methodology is perfect for how we can connect those two.
Yes, right. And it's such a big topic. Like, a lot of people are a bit on the defensive side. I'm not a psychologist and this is really big, so what can we do? And I will clarify in this class like what you can and what you should not try to do and where the limitations are. But actually, as you said, the horses are such an amazing tool to help people. And yeah, we will talk about all the details. And this the week-long trauma presentation with Dr. Mate was fantastic. I've watched it 4 times. Yes, it was amazing. It was really good. It gave me a lot of insights, also, in a lot of maybe confirmations, but also some new aspects. So we should weave it into this class several times. Okay, so if you have any comments or suggestions, please interrupt me.
I think one comment now, just for anyone watching, is I'm not a psychologist. And so for me, it's really important to see kind of what the boundaries are and how, as a facilitator, I can do this in a respectful and trauma-informed way, but without having the psychology background.
Yes, well, and you have named it in the correct way. What we do is trauma-informed sessions, and that is so important. And I think everybody should really study this topic a little bit, because, to be honest, most of us carry some kind of childhood trauma. And we don't have to think about huge things that, like war zones or sudden deaths or something, but even abandonment feelings, feeling alone because your parents had to work or got divorced, or you moved away and were separated from your grandparents, or these things that just happen in life. That is so common to so many people. So yes. Okay, so today we will talk about managing trauma in HGE, horse-guided empowerment sessions, or also other sessions that are led through different methodologies with horses. So we will talk about what is and what is not trauma. And we will go through a little definition. I'll show you the official definition that psychologists have in our diagnose manual, and I will also go into why I don't use it, why we come up with a different definition. And then we will dive into how to facilitate a session with a trauma client, what to do, what we should avoid, some recommended activities. Then we go into boundaries and precautions. And then if you are interested, it's like a little add-on. We can go into the particular case of working with veterans. And veterans could be soldiers, could also be policemen, firemen, and I will tell you why that's a special population that requires a little bit of a different approach. Okay, so let's start. What is psychological trauma? Do you have a definition for it? What would you say?
I would say that it's any type of event or aftermath from a situation that has been particularly difficult, either psychologically, or it could also be physically. From a physical event or experience, there's kind of this psychological aftermath. I could also say Dr. Mate's version after my new week of learning, where he says it's not just what happened to you, it's the wound that the event left in you, and so it's kind of this ongoing aftermath.
Yes, exactly. And that was really interesting to me because I have prepared this class before that week, and I've also given it in Spanish before, so I came up with a definition, and then I was like, well, now let's see what this expert says about it. And it's actually very similar, and it's very different from the diagnose manual, because in psychology, we have a diagnose manual. It's called DSM. The current version is number 5. And there you have all the symptoms and all the definitions for different clinical diagnoses, etc. So they define trauma as an actual or threatened death, or a serious injury, or a sexual violence. That's it. So according to the DSM manual, you cannot be traumatized, you cannot have post-traumatic stress disorder if something lighter happened to you, like losing a job, losing a partner, but not because of death, but because of infidelity or breakup, or abandonment, not threatening death, but just being alone, for example. And I think that is really a very, well, we don't want to criticize the DSM, right? But the definition lacks a lot of situation where I have seen, and many other practitioners have seen, that clients really struggle with the aftermath of a traumatic situation, which has nothing to do with a serious injury or a threat of death. So we came up with a different definition or a different description. So first of all, what is super important is that it's only a psychological trauma if it impacts you for a longer period of time. So if you're right now really affected, but next week you're dealing with it, that's not trauma. It has to be something that affects you over months, maybe years, could be decades. Some people carry this for their entire life, like 40 years, 60 years. And it's something that impacts your emotional well-being. So you could be sad or angry or depressed, but it also affects your physical well-being. And the physical effects of trauma are severe sometimes. It could turn into a disease, it could turn into allergies, it could turn into heart problems, respiratory problems, all of these things. Gabor Mate made that really clear in his movie, that addiction, for example, is a way of how trauma affects your physical well-being, because your body tries to deal with what happened in some way, and usually the body itself comes up with a non-healthy coping strategy. So instead of sharing it, instead of talking to somebody about it, you show it through your body in some other ways that are not controllable. And that level of influencing in an individual's life in a negative way is probably the most important criteria for this. So if you are affected by, let's say, a loss, you're grieving somebody and you are really sad, you also feel weird, maybe you are not hungry, you're not eating really well, but you are going on with your daily life in a regular way, it's not affecting you to a point that you can't do your job, you lose friends, you don't go outside, you can't go on with your regular activities, then I wouldn't say that you're affected by trauma. You are going through a difficult period in your life, but it becomes a psychological trauma if it's negatively affecting you. And that could be because you're choosing to drink, or you're choosing to not talking to anybody anymore, or not eating, or not sleeping, or whatever it is. Your body chooses that. It's not a cognitive informed decision, okay? It's a reaction, but it's influencing your life in a negative way. And then we can talk about trauma. Now, it's important to know that these phases can be very varied in intensity. So you could go through difficult periods throughout the year, for example, when an anniversary comes up, or when you're confronted with certain triggers. It could be very severe. And then on other days, you're feeling fine or almost fine. So it's normal that it's a curve. If you're better, if the curve is going down and you're better, that doesn't mean that you are healed. It can come back at any moment. And there it's important to know and be informed about triggers. So triggers are things, could be a smell, a sound, like a song even, a person, the physiology of a person, really anything that reminds you of what caused the trauma in the first place. Okay, so don't think about only triggers that are obvious, like, I don't know, gunshots. It could be a song that you heard moments before you had a severe accident, and it could be a song that you actually like, but it reminds your brain of the traumatic event, and therefore your brain decides to do a detour and avoid this memory. Okay, so usually these variations are somehow triggered by something. Okay, it could be dates or, you know, pretty much anything. And trauma is caused by a past event and the lack of help or coping strategies. And as Gabor Mate said, it's not what happens to you that causes the trauma, it's the lack of help you have. So usually, or many of the traumas we are dealing with are caused in childhood, but it's not about the severity of the event that happened to the child. It's the lack of help and the lack of support and of somebody being there, and not having the child feel alone. Okay, we have, or you have, in our training for facilitators and horse guided empowerment, you have learned about the sense of coherence theory. And there it's also explained that the same event can have very different outcomes in different people, because it depends on your own interpretation and on your own coping strategies. And that is the problem with children, because they do not have coping strategies. And if there is no adult who's informed and who's empathetic and respectful and helps them through it, then they could develop a traumatic response. Now, most adults are not evil. Okay, so if somebody is experiencing negative effects, a psychological trauma, they are sometimes avoiding to like blame their parents. It's not about blaming somebody. Many people are just not trauma informed, as we said in the beginning. So if your parents said, "Oh, honey, don't cry. Come on, let's have some ice cream, and everything is going to be all right. And you shouldn't cry, and that makes me so sad." That's maybe their best response, but it might not be helpful for the child because they don't feel validated in what is happening to them. And most of this movie, The Wisdom of Trauma, was about how this goes on through different generations and how somebody who did not have this kind of support as a child then doesn't give it to their children. So it's something that goes on through through generations, really. Mhm. Okay, do you have any comments or questions about this?
No, I think I would say that looking at the first definition, the kind of more cut and dry definition, I
Yes.
guess we could say, it it does, you know, this makes a lot more sense to me.
Mhm.
It resonates. It feels like it includes a lot more of the kind of experiences that so many people have lived, and it explains kind of the root causes of it, which
Yes.
make it easier to see how to address it. Just speaking about triggers too, I think there are so many triggers that we have that we may not know where they're coming from, what they are. And I think if you know that this has happened to you or that you may have experienced trauma, then you can kind of go backwards. You know, what
Mhm.
are my triggers? Where is that coming from?
Mhm. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.